Hello, welcome in everybody. It's so exciting to see so many people joining us so quickly at the top of the hour. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to give everybody a couple seconds to settle your audio preferences and settle your video preferences, and then we will jump right in. Again, it's so exciting to see so many people here with us today. We'll be with you in just a second. So as you guys keep on trickling in, I'm just going to give a brief tech intro before we jump into our presentation. My name is Christina, and I work at Acro alongside Mike and Annette in our webinars team. And on behalf of Acro, we are just so excited to see you and to have you guys here, and also to shed light on research that just came out yesterday. So we'll share a link with you guys on the research so you can follow along and read along. And we also want to encourage you to participate in the QR code that is on the screen right now. It's a way that you can interact with our team and follow along with the presentation. In addition to that, I also want to point out the Zoom Acro webinar features, which are right on the bottom of your screen. You have the Q&A function, which we highly encourage you guys to use. It's a way to ask questions and keep them organized for our panelists so that at the end of the presentation, they can go ahead and answer them. You can ask them by your name or anonymously, excuse me. We also have our chat function that we encourage y'all to use if you want to chat with each other. Again, for questions, we do ask that you use that Q&A, but the chat function is also another great way to interact. But without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce Dr. Wendy. Wendy, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you being out there. As Christina just shared, the report actually came out just yesterday, probably yesterday late evening or maybe early this morning, and I've already had a few questions about it. So today, very much hope that you engage with us and our panelists who have generously given their time today to talk about academic operations, the benchmarking and the ties to student success. We will take only about 10 or 15 minutes at most to talk about the findings, and because you have access to the report. So we're going to do some high level talking about the findings. And then we're going to open it up to the panelists. And at that point, I will actually turn the presentation off so you can see their lovely faces and get to know them a bit as we ask them a few questions. And then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. And as Christina said, the Q&A panel is the best place to put your questions, and we will try to get to them. Usually we have a little bit of padding at the end of these webinar timeframes, but today we have a pretty hard stop right at the hour. So we're going to try to keep on time there. And if there are any burning questions at the end that didn't get answered because we've run out of time, perhaps, please, you can always email me directly if you want, or we will actually capture them in this recording and I can get to them afterwards. So this slide is just summarizing the housekeeping, some additional housekeeping in addition to what Christina shared. And the primary presenters today, along with our panelists, it's myself. I'm the Director of Research at Acro, and I always want to thank all of you for participating in Acro research. If it weren't for you, and I say this all the time, if it weren't for you, I couldn't do my job. So we had 281 undergraduate serving institutions responding to this survey. So thank you very much. And we have also Bridget Moran from CourseDog, who is our sponsor, and I'm going to turn the floor over to her so she can introduce herself and CourseDog.
Awesome. Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. As Wendy said, my name's Bridget Moran. I'm the content lead here at CourseDog, so working on all things content and research related. I think this has been really exciting for us. We've been partnering with Acro to explore topics related to academic operations. So this is really everything under the sun, from course scheduling to managing curriculum changes to creating catalog and even more. And so understanding how institutions manage these processes, how they can be optimized to make administrators' lives easier, and how to improve the student experience is something that we're really passionate about here at CourseDog. Specifically, we work with institutions so they can manage all of these different processes in one user-friendly platform. Our goal is really to reduce the amount of time that administrators have to spend manually entering data and coordinating data across multiple sources. We also want to make sure that stakeholders across campus can easily access the data that they need to make their decisions. This could be anything from how many sections of a course should be scheduled to what time of day that class should be scheduled. And ultimately, the goal of these optimized processes is to enhance the student experience and ensure students can access the courses and any additional information that they may need to stay on track for completion. So I'll leave it at that. I know you all aren't here today to hear me talk about what we do, so I'll pass it back to Wendy so she can talk about the survey findings.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm going to take a brief moment here to introduce the panelists. We will have them introduce themselves one-on-one later on during the Q&A session, but want to point out here that we have excellent backgrounds, like very diverse backgrounds, and all of these members are members of our research advisory board. That's a volunteer position, and if you're interested in that, you can Google Acro Research Advisory Board, and we do accept rolling applications because our folks here participate for a while and over a period of 3 years, and then they sign off and can do something else for Acro. But this is 4 of our 5 current members. The 5th, unfortunately, had a family emergency, so he wasn't able to join us today. But their backgrounds are quite diverse, and I think they're going to give you some excellent input on academic operations at their campus. One of the reasons we engage in this research is because our vision, Acro's vision, is tied around a community-centered learning on professional excellence in enrollment and academic services. And I've been doing this research role for quite a while, and I actually don't think we've taken quite as deep a dive in any of the research we've done before relative to the focus on academic operations here. And they are absolutely, as Bridget mentioned, a key to student success. They are the behind the scenes work, but they definitely tie to how well a student can navigate through the system and get their work done and reach their educational goals. We know that higher education spends considerable time on registrars like the other registrar services and recruitment and admissions and financial aid and student life and Bursar. We had a lot of research in that area, both us and NACUBO and NASPA and NACAC and NACADA and all the other alphabet soups that are out there. But from what we understood before we engaged in this research, there's less attention, or at least less regular attention, paid to this suite of functions associated with academic operations. So it was absolutely ripe for getting a benchmark understanding, seeing how institutions think it ties to student success. And then this will serve as a platform for us to redo something like this in another few years and see if anything has changed relative to the tie between student success and enrollment management and academic operations. So if you're a Menti code there, if you want to, what terms come to mind when you think of academic operations at your institutions? So this is a word cloud that's going to populate, and I give you about a minute to see what you guys think about when you think about academic operations at your institutions. There are no right answers. There are no wrong answers. Whatever comes to mind. This is always so cool. I love watching these things populate. And in this particular case, it's going to be interesting to see whether or not what we've decided to target in this research is actually front of mind for the participants in this webinar and those who are going to read the report. Don't be shy. Advising is coming up as a big one here. Interesting. Curriculum, course scheduling, absolutely. Catalog. Technologies are in there, SIS, back office. We got about 10 more seconds to see what ends up is the largest terms here. Faculty interaction. I wonder why they got stuck off to the side over there. All right, thank you very much. So you can see from your participation here, 37 respondents. I know that wasn't a lot of time. We have over 200 on this webinar. So, but thank you for putting your thoughts in there. We have advising and curriculum and scheduling and student success and change processes, provost, relationships, all kinds of terminology. And I can't see anything that's in there that maps. Well, maybe maps. That's not one that I would have like popped to mind for academic operations. But when we were thinking about it in terms of this research, we thought of academic operations as an umbrella term that routinely, but not exclusively, includes these functions: and curriculum management, administration of the catalog, classroom space management, class section scheduling and timetabling, demand analyses, course and program demand analyses, and degree audit management. If we had created a survey that covered all of those, you'd probably still be answering that survey. So we had to take a smaller slice of that data, and we focused on these three things for this particular project. That doesn't mean we don't have an interest in the others, and because we are actually going to do a class section scheduling timetabling comprehensive survey starting in July, and we'll send that out. And we have some potential for doing, we are going to do a 60-second one on course demand and program demand also coming up here. Degree audit management is a future road map. We haven't quite timed that out, but we're going to try to get through this full spectrum. If you find that we missed something under that umbrella that you want to address and we haven't addressed it in Acro research, send me an email and we'll put it on the list. Thank you. Some key insights here. Knowing that institutions are very different, we first tried to find some way to group things. So our academic operations functions typically centralized for undergraduate students. Again, this is only undergraduate students because graduate could be very different. Are they centralized at the institution that responded to the survey? Decentralized for all the processes, including technology and data entry and policy development? Or are they some hybrid of that function? So we use those three things, three hooks or baskets and buckets to try to get an understanding of those particular functions and how they differ and relate to each other across institutional types and characteristics. We generally found that there are 1 to 4 full-time equivalent employees on average to support this function. And that is surprising. I mean, I know the largest number of institutions in this country are 5,000 or less in enrollment. So I even put that hat on and said, does that seem right to only have 1 to 4 when you're trying to support all of those other functions? Because we asked, how many full-time employees equivalents, regardless of the model, do you have to support the catalog management, curriculum management functions? And it's 1 to 4. That's a pretty lean structure. That's for the type of work and responsibilities and how those responsibilities link to other things. That's a pretty lean structure there. They also about 20% say they're different. So if the institutions, among the institutions that served both undergraduate and graduate students, 20% of them said, we do this thing at the undergraduate level, but our graduate stuff is different from this. And that's possibly also future research. We're going to have to tease out and identify and benchmark how these functions are completed at for graduate students. Of all of the things we examined, the academic catalog was the most centralized. I say most centralized because there definitely wasn't a one size fit all. As with a lot of the benchmarking we do, we find that there is so much nuance in practice and policy in the application of technology that it's really difficult for us to say, we find that most institutions do this, because it just doesn't exist. There's so many different flavors out there, and there's no one right or wrong solution. It's really driven by your mission and culture and your resources available to you. Sorry. There are common threads, as I was just mentioning, to academic operations, but overall, basically, they vary quite widely in the application of technology. We had a list of choices of technology that can be applied, and some people checked, yeah, we have formal catalog management solutions or curriculum management solutions, or we use workflows or those kind of things. And others responded and said, gosh, this is all still via email or spreadsheets that we keep in a Google Drive, or it's just an Excel spreadsheet that we share around. So the level of the application of technology varied by institutions. And complex technology stacks, by that I mean there's multiple technologies. So even if somebody said, well, we use Excel, but they used Excel and they used email, or they used a catalog management solution and the SIS and a reporting solution and a workflow. So it's just really complex set of technologies relating to each other at most institutions. They also reported back to us that it's challenging to get data to evaluate academic operations for the vast majority of respondents. So the ability to use data-driven decisions to evaluate the effectiveness of practice and policy and the use of technology is limited for most. The catalog one, we really wanted to understand this because as you understand that the catalog it's a recruitment tool. It's also kind of a handshake with the student that says, for a lot of institutions, these are the courses you're going to take, and we agree that if you take these things, then you're going to earn a degree if you meet all of the other conditions around it. We did ask a lot of detailed questions in this section. So when you go into the report, you'll see what institutions include in the catalog, or whether it's included in a handbook or it's not, or it's included elsewhere. We did do a deep dive of what's included, and that particular question was shaped on a lot of the accreditation bodies have different requirements for what's required in a catalog. So we use that to drive the shape. But the finding is 54% of institutions don't have an approved institutional course and program catalog before students are recruited or admitted to that catalog. That made me think, paused a little bit. So you have some institutions have recruiters, people are going out to high schools and transfer institutions and elsewhere saying, we'd like you to come to our institution. Here's why you think it's a good match for you. But they don't have something ready to say, and if you do, here's the map you follow. Here's what we agree to do. Here's how you could find, do your credential, earn your credential. I found that pretty surprising that it wasn't completed before they already started recruiting people to that academic year. Most common reporting publishing is once a year. And about half of those that do it once a year do it in the summer, release the catalog in the summer. So recruiters are already out there ahead of that in the spring and possibly even the fall before that, recruiting to that new year, but it's not actually published until about 45% of those who publish once a year in the summer. A lot of others did also rolling changes to catalogs and or multiple times per year, which is an interesting thing. How do you communicate those changes to students? And that's also some questions we asked. So if your catalog changes pretty rolling or pretty actively, are all the students that are impacted by that change notified in a way that that they've been notified and they've read it and understand it? I don't know. We didn't get quite to that nuance in this report. We did understand that students are most often made aware of their catalog of record when they meet with their academic advisor, and that may not be until they are actually matriculated at the institution. We asked about student barriers relative to academic operations, and about half said that there are limitations in how students are made aware of policies and practices. Yeah, email, that's tough. You can send out an email. We also know that students don't read emails, particularly at a particularly high rate. So what do? Do we then feed it out to them piecemeal? Like a little text here and there, little pops in the portal that they have to acknowledge? I don't know, because it's a complex matter that doesn't just apply to academic operations, but how do we make students aware of all these policies and practices that impact them so that they are well prepared to work their way through the academic systems? Also, almost half lack technology to support academic operations. So they find that as a barrier to students as well, because if you don't have the right technology to support curriculum changes and catalog changes and program management, that makes it challenging to support the students. Surprisingly for me anyway, was about 46% noted a lack of clarity in related policies. That's interesting to me that about half said that, because that means that those policies need to go through a process of being reevaluated and perhaps engaging students in the rewriting of those policies so that you can get their feedback as to whether the clarity is there or not. And also a little over a third, so that the academic functions, if they're decentralized, that the practices are different potentially across the different or same functions within the institution. So one unit does something relative to catalog management or program management, say at the College of Engineering perhaps, and the College of Education does something slightly different, or some other permutation where not only does a student who crosses these barriers potentially by taking multiple classes elsewhere, they're going to run into different practices and policies depending on where they are. Strategic enrollment management and academic operations seems to be, based upon this little snapshot, not that engaged, not to the level of where you're like trying to fill your classes, trying to shape your enrollment. It's only about 38% have STEM initiatives directly tied to academic operations. And those were about classroom space optimization when they reported back to us, schedule optimization, maybe a new technology was being embraced as part of strategic enrollment management tied to elsewhere. Some were in the process of creating a SIM plan that includes academic operations right now, and some weave it into academic program review, but it's still less than half. So it's not really risen to that level of focus at most of the institutions here that is part of the SEM initiatives. So now, as I said, about right on time, going to hand it off to the panelists who are going to join us here on camera. So I'm going to stop sharing and we are going to have them engage in some conversation with us. And please remember, if you have Q&A, to start populating it into the Q&A section, and we can, once we go through the fixed questions here, we will open it up and read that Q&A, and you can address it to a particular panelist. If you're going to do that, please set at their name in front of their, at Jason or at Henrietta or at Gavin or at Joe or at Bridget, and we will try to go through the questions that way. So again, thank you. I'm going to kick it off, and then I'll kick it over to Bridget, and we'll tag team a bit here, and we'll move forward. So if you don't mind, whoever wants to go first, please introduce yourself and your role at your institution and why academic operations is of interest to you.
I'll go first, Wendy. Hi, everyone. My name is Henrietta Romero. I'm the University Registrar at New Mexico Highlands University in Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Nevada, New Mexico. I'm so happy to be here today. And academic operations is of interest to me because I wholeheartedly believe as a registrar, and this is one comment that was in the report that was made by one of the institutions to listen to the registrar. There's a lot of things that are not necessarily known to students, right? That policy kind of gap that exists. We have that situation with some of our students sometimes. And so this for me it really hits home. And so I'm really happy to participate in being a panelist today and discussing this, this topic as well as the research that came out.
Thank you, Henrietta.
I'll go next. I'm Jason Brown. I'm in the curriculum department at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. Been in higher ed about 17 years and came from a nonprofit background before that. I think the most interesting thing in the study I found was that sort of the student barriers, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. What are we doing to affect students? And through my own experience at my own institution, so many of those things, and this seemed to be carried out by the report, is that confluence of technology meeting policy. And sometimes those things don't really work well together, especially if your business processes are being driven by your technology as opposed to by logic or how things ought to work. So I found that really interesting and sort of validating.
Thank you. Joe or Gavin?
I'm glad to go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Joe Paris from Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm an assistant professor of higher education and the higher education program director. And academic operations is of importance to faculty members from my perspective, given that faculty members play often an important role in curricular development, certainly in academic policy, particularly when faculty members serve as the advisors of students. This happens at our university at the graduate level predominantly, but certainly we need familiarity and the ability to help students navigate academic policy and to navigate successfully their curricula. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you all about this topic this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, I guess there's no one left to go except for me. I'm Gavin Hams, and I'm the Associate Vice President of Enrollment Management at Groundling State University. And this is a particular interest to me because I am finding how important it is to have smooth academic operations if you want to positively impact enrollment. And I'm discovering that sometimes our students, when they come into institutions, they have different lags and different barriers, which does impact enrollment in a quantitative method, but it also impacts enrollment in a qualitative method. And so I am interested to see how we as institutions can do better to operate more effectively and efficiently in a more student-centric manner to help students succeed.
Thank you all. Appreciate you. And we're going to have you all mix it up. Who goes first and second and third on the follow-up questions, and turn the next question over to Bridget.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. I love all these different perspectives that we have here at the table. So I think, one of the top questions that I have for you all is, what finding from this study really stood out to you and why? I think there's, so much great content in this report and the findings that we had. So I'd love to hear, what rose to the top for you all.
I'm going to volunteer one of you. Joe, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm glad to. I was waiting for Gavin to go next, given that on the previous one, we can go in like a snake fashion there. For me, actually, I was quite surprised that just more than half of the institutions that responded have specific catalogs in place prior to the recruitment of prospective students. I was expecting a much greater percentage of institutions having those catalogs in place. Because so often students are interested in the curriculum they're going to be navigating if they decide to enroll at a particular institution and in a particular program. And so one of the concerns I would have is how institutions may actually be setting students up for certain experiences only for the student to realize upon matriculation that actually their experience may be substantively different than what they had initially expected when they were researching a particular institution. So for me, that was a surprising finding. And I imagine, to Wendy's earlier point, maybe some of that is manifest in the rolling process by which catalogs are developed, and not just get developed and published at a particular point in time, but that rolling nature can be problematic for the recruitment of prospective students.
I would have to agree with Joe on that one, because that stood out for me as well. Because being a registrar, right, and having the primary function of the catalog publication within my unit and under my direction, there are instances where we are publishing a catalog and we're recruiting students for new programs, for programs that haven't published just yet, right? And so how many times do students really know about that? And are we setting our students up for a totally different experience than what we anticipated that they would expect to get if we're recruiting them for those programs that we are just new, right? They're new to our institution, they're new to our students. And so for me, that was also a surprising factor.
And if I may, one thing that's really stood out to me and is actually ironic is the fact that in 2022, in this pandemic / post-pandemic era, when the utilization of technology is supposed to be an all-time high, we still have room to grow in the academy in the utilization of technology, especially in a field such as academic operations, because academic operations is the heartbeat of higher education. And so it's encouraging because I see the potential for improvement, but it's also surprising to me that we still have challenges with the implementation and utilization of technology at our core function in higher education.
Kevin, I'd like to follow up with that one there a bit, if you don't mind. What do you think is are the like one or two major roadblocks as to why that is? Because I agree with you, all your points you just made. So, and we as ACRAO try to get to that and get people to understand their technology. What do you think the roadblocks are?
Now I know that in a research setting, I'm supposed to say, what does the research say? But I don't have any research to back up what I'm getting ready to say. But one thing that I believe is that as important and significant as we know academic operations is, we don't see it as a, I guess I'll use the word business model or a business function. And so anytime anything that has a business function, we're always going to use the greatest technology. However, one thing that stood out in the report also is that even at the core of what we do in higher education, there is still challenges to get buy-in, institutional buy-in and support in a utilization of technology at this core function. So if I had to just guess, I guarantee there would be some research out there that suggests that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Jason?
There are lots of things that stood out from the report to me. I'll jump on the, I can't believe people don't have their catalog published before students are going into it. I'll jump onto that bandwagon. That's something my institution had huge problems with up until a couple of years ago. And then we just made that, we had to make that leap and make that hard commitment. We're going to have the catalog out 2 weeks before fall registration begins, no matter what. I mean, well, if we have to crawl over the bodies to get it, we'll get it, right? So that was really interesting to me, that's a fairly common shared experience that's I think definitely negative for students. The other piece that really jumped out to me, and it's sort of all over the place in there, is that the understanding of policies, or the lack of a match between policy and sort of standard operating procedure, and then the technology that it's driving or is driving it, and then how that interacts with students. That's so complex. There's so many issues there. It's going to take a lot to pull apart. But I think the key is that a lot of institutions don't seem to put a whole lot of time into that policy development piece before they jump into a technology piece. And I think that's a major barrier.
Thank you very much. Bridget, did you have any follow-up questions to that one?
No, I think that was all great. I definitely have some follow-up questions, but I think I'll leave them to the end because I'm sure that we'll probably talk through some of those in our coming questions.
Sounds good. All right, I'm going to put Gavin on the spot to go first with this one, and then say, how would you describe the relationship between the academic operations function surveyed for this research and student success at your institution?
Well, it is directly correlated, because without good academic operations, not only do we work harder, but our students can potentially suffer as well. And not at the fault of the student. It is something internal or institutional that we need to fix. And so I believe there is definitely a direct correlation. And if we have that motivation that students first, despite our ways to get there, I think that we can see some effective change.
Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with that in terms of what Gavin said earlier and what Joe said earlier too, is faculty have a lot to do with this process, right? With successful academic operations and the fact that supports student success across the institution. We've been lucky enough to be able to foster such good faculty and academic operations relationships to where our faculty are exactly where we would like for them to be with us, is to be in that buy-in process, to say, yes, we know that the academic operations piece has to be improved in order for our students to do much better academically, because that's just going to support their journey overall. And so we're lucky enough to be able to say that our faculty have been so supportive of how the transitions for academic operations and the changes that we need to make, and the investments, right, we have to make in technology, because like Gavin said, we don't always make a good connection with the technology that we need to be using and when we need to be using it. And so I think for us, we're moving in that direction. And so we hope to kind of be able to see those benefits with our students when being able to engage our faculty in that buy-in process, because they're on the same page as us with academic operations being part of the student success journey here.
I have a follow-up for you. How did you get there? How did you get them on board?
It took a lot of work. It's a lot of elbow rubs. It's a lot of conversation, and it really comes down to also commitment, right? We've committed to to providing much better support to our students on the technology side, especially when it comes to our catalog. That's been one of the biggest challenges that we face as an institution and continue to still face that. But one of the things that we do have, like I said, is the buy-in from the faculty to understand why the technology is needed, and actually, you know, supportive of why it's going to be important for our students to succeed if that technology piece kind of helps support the academic operations piece. And so I have to really thank the faculty leadership to talk to their peers and say, hey, these are the reasons why we need to support the academic operations side of the house, because these are the things that are going to help us not only with advising, but also when our students are coming to us and understanding the policies, because there is that gap that exists with students. How do they really know what the policy is? And how do they know how to navigate around it, right? Because for them, if they're coming in with a policy question to us in registrar, it's more a matter of, I don't understand it. So tell me how you can help me understand it.
Thank you. Jason and Joe?
So I've sort of looked for analogies because I try and explain what from the curriculum and catalog and that sort of perspective to our faculty and to our college, what we are. And we're sort of like the engine in your car, or some part of the engine in your car that you don't necessarily see, but if it stops working, you aren't going anywhere, right? So I feel like the curriculum, catalog, scheduling piece is sort of we're sort of hidden, and people don't really realize it. I saw a comment about a barrier to getting the catalog published is that other departments are not taking it as a priority. And I think you're spot on with that, because we don't really market internally how important the catalog is, how important having a solid, understandable curriculum structure is, without sort of lots of choices and pitfalls and different ways of doing things. All those things come together for student success. Having a very clear catalog, having a very regimented and very clear curriculum change process, so that students aren't surprised when they sign up for a class and, oh, I didn't know I needed a prerequisite, or, oh, I didn't know I needed to know how to write at a college level before I took this class. Those kinds of things are really important, but they're hidden. And so we are definitely that little part of your motor. If it breaks, then no one's going anywhere.
Thank you, Jason.
I love that car analogy, Jason, so much. Or you don't need to know how a catalytic converter works. You just know when it stops working and doesn't allow you to get to your destination. And that's exactly how such a perfect analogy for academic operations. One thing I did just want to offer maybe an explanation for why sometimes there's a disconnect between technology and its supporting aspects of academic operations. And to me, it's underscored by a finding in the report, which is that academic operations are staffed by 1 to 4 individuals on average, right? So we know how much technology requires support, typically, right, of personnel who have expertise in implementing and supporting and maintaining tools and systems. And so if we find that academic operations is so leanly supported already, then technology may not be able to be sustained and developed. And so I think I offer that as one possible explanation for why technology may not be working in the ways that we should hope. And then the last is also technology is helpful, obviously, for students to navigate the educational experience, but technology doesn't build a strong curriculum, right? Faculty often do. And so our technology is simply a tool in the tool belt, but if we're working with programs that are designed in such a way that they already are inherent with challenges, then our technology isn't necessarily going to fix it. So I'll leave you just with that thought as well.
I'd love to add on to that just a bit, if I can. So I think, interestingly enough, I think COVID and the Great Resignation and all those things have also sort of exacerbated the problem. And I'll talk my own experiences. 3 years ago or something like that, we had about 7 staff doing all the curriculum changes, all the catalog, all of those kind of transfer articulation, that kind of stuff. We're down to a staff of 3 now. This is for we're a large community college. We have something like 2,000 courses we maintain, 135 different programs. So just imagine the impact on on somebody that started smaller, it might be down to one person doing that, all those operations, and that is really hard to maintain.
Very good points there for both of you, the reduction in staff and technology, but also the alignment with the good curriculum. And I want to bring it back a little bit to student success, the component in academic operations, and want to see if we don't have any closing comments on that area. But relative to, I mean, any thoughts of how students think about academic operations? Because to tie to Jason's analogy, if it's this little part in the engine and it's not particularly visible to students, how do you measure whether it's successful to them other than how it relates to everything else, advising and registration and all those things? Any thoughts on that?
I'll take a shot at it from my perspective. What we've done at my school to try and integrate that better is we went through an integration of our assessment department with our curriculum department. So we have all the program review, all the course assessments, all of that stuff feeds right back into curriculum change, and then that gets translated into the catalog. So we're trying to use that cycle of not just hoping that we do the right kind of changes and hopefully things look better for students, but we try and look at actual success and actual data to drive that decision making.
Thank you, Jason. I saw Gavin was going to say something.
Yeah, sure. I would just say that from a student perspective, it's pretty much the same from any consumer in the marketplace. Consumers and students they will perceive it well as long as it is accurate and also is efficient and of ease of use. So anything that leads to an easier experience for the students and an accurate experience for the students would not see all of the nuances that go into a curriculum and all the tangible things that we have to do on the back end to make these things happen.
Thank you. Thank you all. Can I hand it back to Bridget? And we're going to actually take a positive slant with this next, and not that it's been negative, but in embracing the positive side with this next question.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. I love this one. I'm curious, are there any particular areas of academic operations at the institutions that you all work at where you really see them help support student success? I think that's one of the areas people love hearing about is those success stories and maybe any lessons learned that they can apply to their institution.
I'll take a shot at that one, Bridget, first. So one of the things that we've done specifically with academic operations on our end of the house is we work very closely with our student success coaches. So we have a success coaching model that's built for our freshman and sophomore students, and then transitions them from their start of the junior year from the success coaches onto the advisor in the program, right? For them to be able to get through the remaining part of their degree. And one of the things that we've done, because we have a policy statement in our catalog that none of our students seem to be aware of, is getting that junior year degree check, right? Seeing where you're at, what is it you're going to need, what to expect in the next year or two when it comes to that. And so one of the things that we've done is we've actually worked with our student success coaches to get their exiting junior year students into our unit to work with our undergraduate coordinator or assistant registrar, as a matter of fact, to kind of help the students know where they're supposed to be and what the next steps are going to be taken for them in their academic journey so they are successful and they're graduating on time. And that has been very helpful to ensuring that our students are taking only the courses that they need, and they're really paying a lot more attention to what the end goal looks like, which is crossing that stage, right?
I think for me, the particular area at our institution that's really it's really multiple areas, and it's been this move over the last few years from very siloed financial aid, registrar, records, curriculum, and assessment, all these things being very sort of siloed. And there's been a real conscious effort made to integrate a lot of what we do. So it's made my life full of meetings, but they're valuable meetings, right? So we have a registrar and the curriculum office in the room working through why things aren't working, as opposed to them working on it and us working on it. And that's really drives good results for students. The other piece I'd say very briefly is culture. We've made a culture change in these offices, as opposed to sometimes fighting a little bit, to cooperative, and having just sort of a culture of students come first. Let's figure out how to make this work for students. Then we'll figure out how to make it work for us. And I think that's really been key to a lot of the improvement that we've been able to do.
Along those same lines, it's a part of you. Jason just mentioned the word culture. And here at Grambling State University, we have a family-oriented culture. And also as an HBCU, that is at the basis and the foundation of what we do. We do a good job of adding the human element into the entire process. So even beyond the curriculum, even beyond the catalog, even beyond all these mandatory disclosure documents, if you will, at the end of that, we always make sure that we add the human element into the process to create a family-oriented environment to make sure that our students succeed at the end of the day.
The last item I'll add to this conversation or this question is that we also seek data from our students, right? We want to learn from our students what they prefer, and we ask questions about that in a host of ways, from surveys to focus groups to even some informal feedback that instructors may ask in their classrooms, and then feedback to our academic operations team. And so understanding what students want, for example, when they want certain courses offered in terms of time of day, day of week, format, in terms of instructional modality, online, hybrid, asynchronous, synchronous, online, etc. We want to hear from our students about that. We don't claim to necessarily know, so we need to solicit that information from students. Historically, in my college, the College of Education and Human Development at Temple, we asked our instructors, when do you want to teach? Not when students wanted the courses. And we reversed that approach. And oddly enough, enrollment increased, retention increased, student satisfaction increased. And so we take now a data-driven approach to demand scheduling, but asking our students, when do you want your courses and in what modalities?
That's fantastic that you're collecting it. Sorry, Jason, if you don't mind. It's cool. All right. Didn't want to crosstalk here. Joseph wanted to follow up with that about collecting the information from the students. One, if you know off the top of your head, which is the most successful way you're gathering that information? And two, I'd actually like to know, and maybe others do as well, is the feedback also on the policy, like the content of the policy, the clarity of the policy, or like the timelines that are associated with curriculum changes or catalog rules at that level?
Yeah, I wish to say we're doing more robust data collection around policy, understanding the policy, even fairness and equity implications of policy, because often policies are not developed with equity in mind, or considering how policy may differentially impact students. And so I wish we're doing more in that regard, but what we are doing is really that demand scheduling or course demand data collection for sure.
I was just going to say, I think the use of student feedback can extend to those things that are in the murky waters, like curriculum, right? Students don't have a direct stake in things like how do faculty make changes to a course. So, but it is important to get that feedback on how things are displayed. You know, what kind of information about a course do you need? What's information that you don't really need and it's just cluttering things up? So that the one thing that we've done some focus groups, but one thing we've done is every year we get a huge bunch of student workers that we have do a lot of the, you know, the sort of around the office tasks, but we use the heck out of our student workers to evaluate our catalog pages. We've had students, some federal work study students trained in how to use our catalog management system and actually doing some entry of curriculum changes. And they've come up with some great insights. It's a better experience for the student because they're actually learning on real software and learning real stuff as opposed to making coffee. But they've come up with some really great insights on like, hey, I don't need to know this about this program. I don't need a flowery description. What I want is the classes I need to take. So that kind of thing has been really important for us is using our student workers.
Those are both excellent ways of describing ways of gathering information. And I hadn't thought about like doing it in the classroom format like Joe described, or even like saying the user interface. What is it that you're displaying to them through the technologies that you're using that they go, that's just like noise to me? And when we think about how students digest things, not all students, but a lot, very small bites, right? They want them in small digestible things. So engaging those students, that's fascinating. A way to tie it to student success in that interface is this UI what you want from us? Is this content there? We are at 10 minutes before the hour. I see we only have one question in the Q&A so far. So I would like to do a quick round robin and then just open it up here a little bit, because you guys have talked a lot about technology, but we did have a specific question about it. So I'm going to tweak it a bit. So you talked about some absence of technology. If you could pick one to support academic operations, which then is tied to improving student success, that technology you don't currently have, and I'm putting you on the spots because you guys didn't have this question to prepare, what would you pick and why?
I'd be glad to go first. We at Temple have a degree auditing system for our undergraduate student population. We do not have one for our graduate population. Our graduate student, and actually our graduate programs often have far more modifications and changes than our undergraduate programs do. So I think, would benefit so much. Our students would benefit significantly from a graduate level degree auditing system. And the reason for that is that there's more centralization of our undergraduate curriculum, right? We have more centralization. Much of our graduate programs are managed in a very decentralized way. And I think some of those nuances are captured in this report quite well when we think about how academic operations is structured and how those structures may differ undergraduate versus graduate. But a degree auditing system for our graduate programs across the university would be the #1 tool that I would like to see at Temple.
Thank you.
I don't want to go on record of endorsing one particular product or software, but I will answer the question like this. I would like to see any technology that would provide accurate, timely data for students first and foremost, but also as equally as important, to take the burden off of the already lean staffed offices that have to manage this with limited people and all at the same time do so many other duties. So something that would ease the burden of staff and also provide accurate and timely data for students. That's what I would like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think rather than a specific technology, because as an institution, we've sort of added things as we've seen we need them. The real place where that kind of breaks down and I think we struggle is the integration between these various technologies. So we have a great curriculum management system, I won't say whose, and a great catalog management system that works to that. But it doesn't really work that well in terms of pulling or dropping data into our SIS. It actually doesn't do anything with the software that we use to drive course scheduling or room demand. None of those things really talk to each other. At least they don't talk to each other well. And so some sort of data standard or data integration between all of those things that would allow you to know, hey, we have lots of students that want this course and that how that affects everything else, or hey, we just added a new course. Here's how it needs to sort of migrate out to all those other pieces of technology that we use. And that's really, I think, the hardest part, because if your institutions are like mine, we said, oh, we need this. And so we do an RFP, we get that software, and then, oh, we need that. Well, and they do that separately. And then those things don't talk to each other. So it makes things really difficult, because then you're still having to jump out of these automatic processes into a manual process where humans are involved, and then back into another automatic process. And every time you introduce a human, there's error. So that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you. Henrietta, you want to add anything to that?
Sure. So we would like a curriculum management software and a catalog software. I'll just be honest about it. We've been working through it for the last 2 years. And like I said, our faculty are super supportive of the fact that we really need something like this. And we are a small rural institution. And while we may not have a lot of money or funding coming and a high population of students, we still need that because it's housed with one person, right? We are that unit that has that one person who's responsible for that huge task, which takes a couple of months to even get finalized and ready to publish. So that's on our wish list.
Thank you.
And-
Go ahead, Bridget. I was going to wrap up.
Thanks, Wendy.
Mm-hmm.
I just had a quick follow-up question for you, Henrietta. We had a question come through the chat earlier that asked about overcoming barriers to cost when it comes to implementing these new softwares, and any tips you have there about how to overcome those barriers, what connections need to be made, what stories need to be told?
So first of all, the connections that need to be made, first and foremost, need to be made with the faculty. There really needs to be a very strong relationship and a co-partnership really with the faculty unit, right? In terms of what we're trying to do on the academic operations side to be able to make their jobs and their lives easier as faculty. Faculty are focused on reaching our students at the very core of what they're here to do is teach, right? They're not trying to get through a technology or try to learn something new or a new system. You know, what we're trying to do is make things easier for them, to advise their students, to help their students. But the other thing with the cost thing is we also have to get over the barriers of how do we be able to say this is really needed for us? Where do we go with the finance department, and what do we do with our budget hearings and all of those kinds of things? I'll just tell you, it's been a well-fought battle for me to be able to go through these experiences, but I have really good relationships at the leadership level. I have great support from my provost. I have great support from my deans, my department chairs, the faculty governance groups that are across the campus. Those are the most important things that are going to help kind of drive your successes to be able to get over that cost barrier.
Thank you, Henrietta, and thank you to everyone. I want to tie it up here and make sure we get, it's actually a comment. I looked at it. It's more of a comment, but it's a poignant one. That this academic operations is, the takeaways I have is it's kind of behind the scenes for a lot of people. It doesn't get a lot of attention, reinforces what we saw from the report, but it's extremely important. It helps, it's tied to student success. It helps the institution overall move forward. Technology isn't an answer. It's a tool that was mentioned earlier as well, that we have challenges with our students getting the policies to them, the information to them so they understand it. There's some challenges there and some opportunities. We have some institutions that are engaging in ways, very creative ways, to get feedback on these things about course scheduling and timetabling and user interface for academic operations. So great progress is being made and attention to that among the panelists and those respondents to the survey, but it is a complex mechanism, very much like every other process we have in higher education that has these interwoven things. And when I visually think of it, I think of it as a black widow web. And if you haven't seen those, they are very messy, they're very strong, and they have lots of little nodules. They are not flat and even. And you're trying to make a Charlotte's Web. I'm going to use an old school story where the little spider creates this beautiful spider web and it says like register now across it or something. And that's what you're trying to do with all your policies and technologies. And I applaud your efforts for doing that. And the comment in here is just an observation, perhaps on old school, but catalogs don't roll. They are produced once a year and are in agreement with the student. That could be why some schools don't take the catalog process seriously. And it may be that catalogs are coming out so late because we are lean on staffing of those critical items. Yeah, the staffing is an issue there. Absolutely. Any closing comments here before we sign off, panelists? Anything?
It's great to be with everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Take care.
Take care, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining. And to our panelists, thank you guys so much. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Cheers on the publication.